third grade. Let's continue our story of the one and only Ivan. And you remember Ruby was having a hard time with the loss of Stella, and she wanted a story for bed that night. And so Ivan finally decided that he would tell her the story. And he came up with just telling her the story of his life and how he came to be there. So we have talked about this a lot in class. So instead of reading all this, let's just remember that he was born in Africa, and he had a sister as well. But remember, they were captured, and his sister didn't make it to the United States. Her life ended before they got there. She was having a hard time being locked up in the crate and coming to America. But Ivan survived. And when he came to America, you know that Mac had bought him. So Mac takes him to his home to live. And at first it's so fun. Mac and his wife Helen take Ivan to buy ice cream. They go through like a drive-through, and people think Ivan is so cute, and he's just their little pet, and he just hangs out with them. Well, he kind of starts getting larger, and he gets into things at home, and pretty soon it causes trouble between Mac and Helen, his wife. And so, unfortunately, Helen decides to leave their home, and she doesn't stay there anymore. So Mac kind of gets bitter and kind of ugly, and he's not a very happy man, but he still keeps Ivan with him. Well, like I said, Ivan's getting bigger. So finally, we know the story that Ivan comes to live at the Big Top Mall. So now we're going to take up the story here where he has finished the story. And it says, 9,876 days. Ruby is finally asleep. I watch her chest rise and fall. Bob, too, is snoring. But my mind is still racing. For perhaps the first time ever, I've been remembering. It's an odd story to remember, I have to admit. My story has a strange shape, a stunted beginning, an endless middle. I count all the days I've lived with humans. Gorillas count as well as anyone, although it's not a particularly useful skill to have in the wild. I've forgotten so many things, and yet I always know precisely how many days I've been in my domain. I take one of the magic markers Julia gave me. I make an X, a small one, on my painted jungle wall. I make more X's and more. I make an X for every day of my life with humans. My marks look like this. And here's a picture. The rest of the night, I mark the days, and when I am done, my wall looks like this, and I just showed you. And so on until there are 9,876 X's marching across my wall like a parade of ugly insects. It's almost morning when I hear steps. It's Mac. He has a sharp smell. He weaves as he walks. He stands next to my domain. His eyes are red. He is staring out the window at my empty parking lot. Ivan, my man, he mumbles. Ivan. He presses his forehead against the glass. We've been through a lot, you and me. This part's called A New Beginning. We don't see Mac for 2 days. When he returns, he doesn't talk about Stella. Mac says he is anxious to teach Ruby some tricks. He says the billboard is bringing in more visitors. He says it's time for a new beginning. All afternoon and into the evening, Mac works with Ruby. Ruby's feet are looped with rope so that she cannot run. A heavy chain hangs off her neck. Mac shows her Stella's ball, her pedestal, her stool. He introduces her to Snickers. When Ruby obeys Mac, he gives her a cube of sugar or a bit of dried apple. When she doesn't, he yells and kicks at the sawdust. When George and Julia arrive, Mac is still training Ruby. Julia sits on a bench and watches them. She draws a little, but mostly she keeps her eyes on Ruby. Bob watches too. He's hiding in the corner of my domain under Not Tag. It's raining outside, and Bob does not like damp feet. Ruby trudges behind Mac, her head drooping. Endlessly they circle the ring. Sometimes Mac slaps her flank with his hand. Suddenly, Ruby jerks to a stop. Mac pulls the chain hard, but Ruby refuses to move. "Come on, Ruby," Mac is almost pleading. "What is your problem?" "She's exhausted," I say to myself. "That's the problem." Mac groans. "Idiot elephant." "Idiot human," Bob mutters. "Walk, Ruby," I say, although I know she's too far away to hear me. "Do what he says." "Walk," Mac commands. "Now." Ruby doesn't walk. She plops her rump on the sawdust floor. "I think maybe she's tired," Julia says. Mac wipes his forehead with the back of his arm. "Yeah, I know. We're all tired." He pushes Ruby with the heel of his boot. She ignores him. George looks over from the food court, where he is wiping off tables. "Mac," he yells, "maybe you should call it a day. I'll close up." Mac yanks on Ruby's chain. She's as anchored as a tree trunk. He pulls harder and falls to his knees. "That does it," Mac says. He brushes sawdust off his jeans. "I am through playing around." Uh-oh. Mac stomps off to his office. When he returns, he is carrying a long stick. The gleaming hook on its end is almost beautiful, like a sliver of moon. It's a claw stick. Mac pokes Ruby with the sharp point. Not hard, just a touch. I can tell he wants to see how much it can hurt. I growl low in my throat. Ruby doesn't budge. She is a gray, unmoving boulder. She closes her eyes, and for a moment I wonder if she might have fallen asleep. "I'm warning you," Mac says. He breathes out. He stares at the ceiling. Ruby makes a huffing sound. "Fine," Mac says. "You want to play it that way?" He draws back the claw stick. "No!" Julia cries. "I'm not going to hurt her," Mac says. "I just want to get her attention." Bob snarls. Mac swings. The hook slices the air just a few inches above Ruby's head. "See why you don't want to mess with me?" Mac says. He draws back the claw stick again. "Now move!" Ruby jerks her head, flinging her trunk toward Mac. She makes a noise that sends the sawdust scattering. It makes my glass shiver. It is the most beautiful mad I have ever heard. Ruby's trunk slaps into Mac. I don't see exactly where she strikes him, somewhere below his stomach, I think, and I know he must be uncomfortable because Mac drops the claw stick and falls down on the ground and curls into a ball and howls like a baby. "Direct hit," Bob says. Oh, so now we know that Ruby is not liking the way that Mac is trying to train her, is she? So we're going to find out what happens after the kind of sort of attack next time. All right, see you later, guys. Bye.